This video is sponsored by Premium Sound, one of the UK's premier dealers located in Kensington, London, with an online store carrying a comprehensive inventory to cater for a variety of needs. For more details, click the link in the description. Do you really need separate boxes for a streamer, DAC and preamp, assuming that you're not connecting any analog sources? My view has always been it depends on how much you're spending. Certainly at £699, which is currently the price of the Bluesound Node X, I think you'd be hard pushed to do much better if you got a basic streamer and a separate DAC. That's saying nothing of the Eversolo DMP A6 that sounded great at a recent show and seems to offer even better value for money at £759. There's a point where having separate boxes with their own dedicated power supplies and the noise isolation benefits that brings outweighs the economies of scale of having everything in one box. But where exactly is that point? For circa £1,600, I don't think there's a DAC that sounds better than the Gustard R26. It also comes with a decent sounding streaming module which relies on third-party UPnP apps or Roon integration. I wouldn't use it as a preamp though, even though it comes with a built-in digital volume control and an analog one which is even quieter. Both significantly impact on performance. So what if you up the budget to £2,699? The Auralic Altair G1.1 is even better built than the Gustard. Plus, it comes with a dedicated app, a nice display, and what is reputed to be a very good volume control. Could this offer the complete digital front-end solution and the kind of performance that most people will ever need? Let's find out. The Auralic Altair G1.1 measures 340 by 320 by 80 mm or 13.4 by 12.6 by 3.2 inches with an impressive chassis comprised from thick anodized aluminium plates. That's why the unit weighs 7.4 kilograms or 16.3 pounds. The nice clean front fascia houses a 6.25 mm quarter-inch headphone socket and a 4-inch 300 ppi colour display. It's a shame that it isn't touchscreen like Hi-Fi Rose devices, but operation and volume adjustment via the rotary knob is intuitive. The display illustrates what's playing, allows selection of tracks in the queue and selection of inputs. I'll go through the most relevant settings for the system, streamer and processor in the setup section. There's a menu to set up and browse libraries from stored music files, either connected externally or internally if the optional £400 2TB SSD drive has been fitted. The Altair supports the gamut of streaming services, Internet Radio, Bluetooth and AirPlay 2. Spotify Connect and Tidal Connect will allow direct streaming, and it's Roon ready. These functions are also accessible from Auralic's Lightning DS app. It only works with iOS devices, leaving Android and PC users disappointed. I noticed switching between tracks was a lot less laggy than with my older and considerably more affordable Aries Mini because the Altair G1.1 has superior processing power. The rear has a RJ45 Ethernet port for the streamer, but you can also connect to your network wirelessly. The USB port labelled HDD is where external hard drives and USB sticks can be attached. It can also be used for CD drives for playback or ripping. There are digital inputs for USB, Toslink, coax and AES EBU, but no digital outputs, master clock input or I2S. It's clear that Auralic only intended the Altair G1.1 to be used as a one-box solution, but that means that connecting external DACs, master clocks and DDCs is not an option if you plan to upgrade performance down the line. Analog outputs are provided on single-ended RCA and balanced XLR. If you turn the unit upside down and unscrew 8 bolts, you can remove the bottom plate, which I'll set aside here. And then unconventionally, everything's mounted to the top plate for reasons I'll discuss in a moment. Let's start with the power supply transformer, which is from Plytron, part of Nortel Group, top quality part, rated at 2 × 115 VA. So it's got double windings for the primary and the secondary, most likely to deal with 230 and 115 volts across the world. And it's a decent size, and that helps to keep power supply impedance low. The power supply filter caps are here. The big one that you see, that one is 10,000 microfarads, and that's from Nishikon, top quality Japanese manufacturer. And the smaller ones are from Samwa, which is a Korean manufacturer, mid-tier. There's 3 of them actually, so there's the one that you see here and another 2 under there which you can't quite make out. That's, like I say, a mid-tier manufacturer, so it's a shame they haven't gone for Nishikons all round. So a little bit of cost savings gone on there. And then running along there is the main board, which is section off on the right hand side. So I'll just point out the main parts. There is a Intel wireless receiver that handles Bluetooth and also the wireless connectivity, which Auralic are very proud of. They've optimized that over the years, and that's one of the reasons why you buy an Auralic device, because their wireless interface, if you're not using Ethernet, is very good. And over in the corner, hopefully you can make that out here, that's the XMOS processor, which basically handles the USB interface. This device has Auralic's active USB. The USB signal is reclocked to reduce jitter, but it also bypasses the USB power stream. It's using its own linear power supply instead, and that helps to lower noise that you'd normally get from a USB signal transfer. You can't see Auralic's Tesla G2 processor, but hopefully if I can get the angle right, you can see that that main board is elevated and the processor is sandwiched between it and the top plate, effectively using the top plate as a heatsink. There's some additional shielding on this side, and this is where the DAC, the headphone amplifier, and the output stage are housed. And I'll make out the ESS DAC, which is here. That's the ESS 9038 Q2M DAC chip. Auralic's implementation is a little bit different because they use it for DA conversion only, and they use their own filtering. There's also some nice Panasonic output relay switching devices. And this device is also fitted with the optional SSD drive, which is 2 terabytes for £400. Seems good value when you consider, standalone devices from the likes of Inuos and Melco running into thousands. But you can fit your own, and there might be some marginal cost saving there. All in all, very nice topology, top quality parts. The only little gripe I have are those 3 little caps from Samwa. But yeah, nice stuff. I'm going to have to make a confession here. I wasn't expecting that much from the Altair G1.1 performing as a DAC. I thought it's going to have the typical ESS DAC presentation, resolving but ultimately artificial sounding and with a flat soundstage. I thought it's going to get blown out of the water by a decent R2R ladder DAC, something like the Gustard R26, which is £1,000 cheaper, by the way. That didn't turn out to be the case, and I'm glad that I had these 2 streaming DACs here at the same time, as judging differences in DACs is always more subtle than between speakers or amplifiers. I'm going to interrupt this review for a moment to give you a bit of an update on the Gustard R26. I reviewed it back in February 2023, and at the time I was hugely impressed with the amount of detail it was able to retrieve, but it was a little shy in the bass and thin in the mid-range. Well, since then it's had a lot more use. I've run it in a secondary system. I've even lent it to a friend of mine for a month who's considering DACs around this price. And now that I've got it back, I can report that the sound has changed. Not drastically, but significantly enough for me to give this update. It's a little fuller in the bass and the mid-range, which gives it less of that analytical type of presentation. It's an improvement over what I already thought was the benchmark DAC at its price. Now, before someone gets busy typing away and says, well, you should have run it in properly, I tried my best. I ran it for a month in another system before I started the review process, and I can't run things in for 6 months every time. I'd never get anything done. Anyway, enough of that. What about the Auralic Altair G1.1? I don't believe for a minute that all good DACs sound the same, but here we have an almost identical sounding product to the Gustard R26. That's not a bad thing at all, but it's a sound that's hard to describe. I normally look for traits that are either exceptional or below par, but I have nothing to report on both accounts. It's not a DAC that will draw your attention to a particular characteristic or lack of in another area. It just does everything exceptionally well. There's great tonal balance between the bass, mid-range and highs. The mid-range transients are rock solid and vocals and lead instruments nicely fleshed out. as are upper harmonics and details beautifully expressed. I'm not one for padding out reviews unnecessarily with audiophile BS, so I'm not going to labour any points here. The Altair G1.1 does a remarkable job of getting out of the way of the music without any fuss. I can tick off its resolving powers, dynamic ability, soundstage and imaging as well. If push, I'd say that the Altair G1.1 soundstage is a little bit wider than the R26, but the R26 is a little bit deeper, and that's it. I spent days trying to tease out other differences between these DACs, and I couldn't find any. Then I switched to my Denafrips Venus II DAC that retails for more than the Altair G1.1 and has no streamer, so I connected my trusted Auralic Aries Mini as a source fed by an MCRU linear power supply. I should clarify that my Venus II is still running the original 1.0 firmware. Since then, the 3.3 firmware was released when the Venus 12th anniversary came out in March 2023, and because it received mixed reports, a 1.4 firmware was released soon afterwards. It all gets a little bit confusing, but in summary, the 1.4 firmware is supposed to combine the best traits of the 1.0 and the 3.3. I just haven't had a chance to mess around with firmware updates. It's something that I plan to do soon. My Venus II has more meat on the bone than the Altair G1.1. There's more bass weight and a lot more acoustic mass to the mid-range. The soundstage is wider and considerably deeper, and there's better space between the instruments, but it isn't more resolving. If anything, bass definition on the G1.1 is a little bit better, as are transients in the mid-range. Overall, the Venus II is the better DAC, but I'd be happy with either of these two in my digital front end. I know people would be looking to use the Altair G1.1 directly with a pair of active speakers or a power amp, and that's okay if you want to get started, but using the internal digital volume control does drop performance down a little bit. So my advice would be ultimately to upgrade to a dedicated decent quality preamp. The G1.1 doesn't colour the sound in any particular direction, so I see it working with a wide range of speakers and amplifiers. Just stick to stuff that is price appropriate, which I think would be speakers and amps in the £2,000 to £5,000 price range. Let's go through some of the more useful settings. Under System, the volume control can be enabled or disabled. There are 4 of Auralic's proprietary digital filters to select from, all made a perceptible difference to the sound. Balance and Smooth were my personal favourites. There's a left-right balance control. The fixed output can be adjusted to suit your system, and in display settings, the G1.1 can be set to be always on, switched off after a certain time of inactivity, and the display brightness can be altered. A smart remote control can be programmed to control a whole host of functions, as no remote control is provided with this device. The streaming menu lists the supported streaming protocols and streaming service providers. As you can see, it's pretty comprehensive. Logging in is intuitive and done via the app. Just select your service, input your username and password. The processor menu allows you to access DSP functionality, such as upsampling the incoming signal up to 384 kHz. There's a 3-band parametric EQ that can be adjusted for frequency, gain, which is essentially volume, and Q factor. That's how wide or narrow frequency the adjustment works over. There is also preset DSP settings for speaker placement. Those who sit closer to one speaker than the other can compensate gain and for distance accordingly. The Auralic Altair G1.1 is a superbly well constructed streaming DAC. It's not cheap at £2,699, but sonically it will hold its own with the best DACs below £3,000, and most of them don't have streamers built in, including my very own Denafrips Venus II. The Venus II is still the better DAC, but not by much. There's people who are going to complain that there's no touchscreen, and they should go out and buy a Hi-Fi Rose product. Others will be miffed that there's no I2S, no master clock input, and no digital output, so they can't upgrade performance by attaching external boxes as the rest of their system improves. And that's fair, but it's clear that Auralic have focused this device on being a pure one-box solution. Judging by how good a job they've done, I think 95% of the people who wind up buying it will never think about getting anything else. I think the most valid gripe is that I think it's about time Auralic developed an app for Android users. The excellent Gustard R26 streaming DAC offers almost identical sound quality for £1,000 less, but it isn't quite as well built, doesn't have a coloured screen to display cover art, nor a DSP engine with parametric EQ, and you have to rely on third-party streaming apps. That justifies the £1,000 difference in price in my eyes alone, but then you have to account for the fact that the Gustard is sold through a website, whereas the Auralic is sold through a dealer network. The likelihood is if something goes wrong down the line, the level of support that you're going to receive is quite different. I very much doubt that you can do better than the G1.1 in terms of features and performance for the price, whether you go for an all-in-one or a separate streamer and DAC. And that's why the Auralic Altair G1.1 gets an outstanding from this channel. My question of the day is, how is your digital journey progressing and how do you see it progressing in the future? Please let me know in the comment section. All that remains for me to say is if you like what I'm doing with this channel and you want to see it grow, and assuming you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon for consultancy services. There's a couple of tiers there that you can access if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which is a great way to interact with me and other Patreons. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.